With research comes certain responsibilities. That being said, in this video, we will discuss the roles that deception and accountability play in research. Deception is the process of misleading or misinforming an individual on the given truth of some scenario. There are two types of deception. The first is active deception, which is when someone purposely tells you something that is not true. The second is passive deception. Passive deception is when someone does not give you accurate information and or leaves out bits and pieces of information. In research studies, for example, active deception would be if a researcher tells the participant that they are being timed as they complete an online survey, but their completion time is never recorded. Passive deception would be if a researcher timed the participant's completion of the survey without mentioning anything about being timed.
Accountability is when someone is held responsible. It means someone is taking responsibility for actions that have occurred. In research studies, accountability is important for protecting participants' rights and making sure that a researcher's practices are ethical. It means that when the participant feels as though their rights have been violated, that a researcher is held responsible for justifying their actions or owning up to unethical practices. It also means that the researcher is liable for violations of a participant's rights. Accountability serves as a safety net that provides participants in research with protection from exploitation.
However, there are times when deception is acceptable in terms of research studies. Deception is only acceptable when 1. The use of deception is absolutely essential to the value of the research being conducted, 2. There are no other possible alternatives, and 3. When the research involves little to no risk. In this case, deception cannot be used if the description of the risk downplay the seriousness of the actual risk. Researchers should always inform the participant about the deception that is taking place before the study and explain when and why it was used after the study.
As one grapples with concepts of deception and accountability, the intersection of ethics and/or morality should be addressed. Both of these concepts are philosophically founded on the idea of moral responsibility, which goes to reason that a specific type of response is appropriate to address the intent and outcome of an action. As motivations and values differ from one individual to the next, certain considerations must take place that determine how one might achieve the ends they wish in any action. The role of a researcher is to achieve their personal ends of supporting theories with evidence through a procedure. If this procedure works with humans as a means of obtaining data, it must strictly follow guidelines that are designed with moral responsibility in mind. This means preserving health, well-being, and respect for participants in such a setting. This does not mean that research is expunged of deception. Quite the opposite. It only means that the deception involved must be ethically acceptable to the public, who are represented by institutional review boards, or IRBs. These review boards exist to maintain ethical practices in research. Any deviation from these sets of expectations can be deemed unethical, unreliable, or unacceptable.
IRBs are also tasked with protecting subjects in research. They collect documentation of informed consent and review research activities which they can then approve or disapprove. They have a set of criterion that research must meet, ensuring that risks are minimized towards subjects, the subjects are given informed consent, and that the selection of subjects is fair regarding issues of social and individual justice. When needed, they will also require subjects' information be kept confidential and that the researchers monitor the data that they collect from subjects.
Certain deception is designed to promote realistic responses while still not causing psychological harm to participants. An example of research-oriented employment of these strategies can be found in the critically examined Milgram obedience experiment of 1963. Participants were tasked with teaching a learner who would receive a shock if they answered questions incorrectly. The learner, who was an actor in on the experiment, was not subject to any true harm, but the employment of deception caused psychological distress to some of the participants. In the end, the researcher obtained the information they were looking for, but participants were still actively deceived, and to the detriment of some. Although the ends might yield favorable results, it is the responsibility of the researchers to protect the participants. This is where informed consent becomes relevant.
Some of the ways to avoid violating participant rights include making sure the participant is giving informed consent. Informed consent means the participant has an adequate understanding of the risks and benefits of the study and what their participation will entail. Another way is by making sure that the assessed benefits are greater than the assessed risks to the participants themselves. Lastly, it is important to be critical about who is selected to participate in a study and what that might mean for them individually as well as socially for what groups they may belong to.
If you have participated in a research study and feel like your rights are being violated or that you've been deceived, here are some steps that you can take to hold the responsible parties accountable. Contact the lead researcher of the study to express your concerns. If that conversation doesn't make you feel like that issue has been resolved, you can then contact the IRB associated with the research study. Lastly, you can contact the overseeing organization depending on the type of research study. For example, if you were involved in a research project at Michigan State University and felt that you've been deceived, you can first reach out to the lead researcher. If that doesn't go over well, you can then make a complaint directly to the IRB.
It is possible to perform modern and acceptable research only if the concepts of deception and accountability are understood and applied. Otherwise, one runs the risk of devaluing their work.